We should have the advert go up first, right?
Humanity stands at a crossroads. We have a choice between freedom and fear, ignorance or truth. The Great Reset
We need a great reset.
or the Great Freeset. The World Council for Health has emerged with a comprehensive vision. We aggregate holistic, unbiased health advice from international sources, free from the shackles of vested interests. We have united over 230 unique organizations spanning 55 countries. Powering the international health sovereignty movement, we have activated 33 autonomous country councils, representing voices around the world and enabling people to make the best informed choices. We see the big picture. We have a long-term vision. We implement a broad strategy that respects individuality, ethics, and life on Earth. We're powering international opinion, and we are being heard. Welcome to a new era of enlightened health discourse, empowered by science and shared wisdom. Co-create a healthy, free, and sovereign world with us, the World Council for Health. A better way for a better world.
Good evening, buonasera, buenas noches, bonsoir, guten Abend, hello, ni hao, konnichiwa, dobry den, Sabona, Namaste, and good morning from our exciting Better Way Today meeting on Monday, the 3rd of March, 2025. Today with some important facts about parasites, mold, fluoride, and more. With my amazing colleagues, Dr. Mark Trozzi, Shabnam, Palesa, Mohamed, and Francesca Haven, who unfortunately has a very, very weak signal tonight. So I hope we'll have her rejoining us. And Tess, Dr. Tess Lawrie is on her way from the United States, so won't be joining us tonight. So I'm glad to be amongst you two and hopefully three. And take it away, Mark.
Well, it's great to be with you too, Christof. What an interesting week it's been. You know, we've had lots of interaction behind the scenes with scientists and people trying to crack the eggs on politics and bring back some legitimacy. And, you know, it's interesting in that, Christof, I see, you know, even the good guys advancing in the old order political structures are having to compromise a lot, you know, between the truth and the momentum. Well, and that's what's so wonderful about the Better Way is we just kind of, you know, boldly go where honestly we should. And so it's always a highlight of the week, and I'm glad to be a part of it. Now, we had some announcements, but are we going to jump into those first, or shall we jump right into the subject for the day?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mark,
I think I was meant to do a little introduction to the event, item 2 of our program flow for today, just to say that. You know, we understand that much of the conversation and narrative and content in the last couple of years is centered around injections, otherwise known as vaccines. And of course, the all-important issue of 5G, GMO, many issues. But one of the underlooked and or overlooked areas that affect our health considerably, both physical health and mental health, is environmental toxins. And they include mold. Parasites, of course, we know are internal, but they also exist in the external environment. And fluoride, which, of course, is a neurotoxin. So we thought we'd hear perspectives from our friends here today, our health advocates and human rights advocates, around these 3 particular environmental or internal challenges. We wanted to cover plastics and heavy metals, but too much for now. Perhaps if you subscribe to the newsletter, we'll do another one on the heavy metals and plastics. But for tonight, we're covering parasites, mold, fluoride, and each of those will be covered by Dr. Mark Trozzi, will cover fluoride, Christof Plothe DO will cover parasites, Francesca Havens will cover mold, she's our resident expert, and then I'm going to come in to talk about legal and advocacy efforts on these three issues. They affect our health more than we think. So if you're watching right now from any one of our platforms, please, for the health of yourself, your family, your colleagues, your neighbors, anyone you know or don't know, share the live link to this broadcast and let's become healthy together. So with that being said, who's going first?
Well, I'll be glad to jump in. And
go ahead.
I think I'm going to open the conversation regarding the subject of fluoride. And Mark, Lawrie, are you able to pull up that picture of the periodic table for a moment? So everybody, this will bring you back to high school, back in the days when you were educated and you knew what gender you were. And so if you recall the periodic table, if you go all the way to the right side of the table, you see on the far right side of the table is helium, neon, argon, krypton, xenon, okay? What's unique about all those atoms is that their outer electron shell is complete. They have all the electrons that fit in their outer shell, which means they're stable, they're inert, they don't react. Just to the left of that, you can see fluoride, chloride, bromine, iodine. And these are atoms whose outer electron shield is missing one electron. In other words, it has the capacity to take on one more electron, which means it's very good at making chemical bonds. It can make very strong chemical bonds. It can make very powerful reactions. And if you notice in that, you'll see that chloride and iodide are both in there. And if you look in biochemistry textbooks, you will notice that iodide and chloride actually have a role in your body. They're actually involved in many chemical reactions. Of course, iodide, particularly famous for its role in the production of thyroid hormones. An interesting thing, and this is a challenge for everyone out there. Everyone, please pull out your biochemistry textbooks. Find the biggest, thickest ones you can. And please try to find me a chemical reaction in the human body that involves fluoride. Because as far as I know, one doesn't exist. And yet fluoride has been promoted in human health for many decades now. An interesting factoid, if you go back to the early 1900s, the American Medical Dental Association only endorsed one toothpaste. And guess what? It wasn't fluoride. It was called Iodent. And it was a toothpaste that contained iodine. Yes, iodine that you can take too much of and hurt yourself of, but that is very essential, and having a healthy supply of iodine in your body is very important. Now, fluoride's history is quite different. It is true that some people's drinking water can be naturally higher in fluoride. There are fluoride salts that can exist in rock and be dissolved into water. When fluoride levels are high, you often get medical conditions. The most obvious one is called fluorosis, where you'll notice people that have white spots on their teeth. And though it's true that fluoride hardens your teeth, hardening things can also make them more fragile. Anyone in the audience who's involved in metallurgy will know about that. You can make a metal so hard that it's fragile, that it cracks. And so making your teeth hard isn't all good. It is true that there may be some benefits to fluoride applied topically, but unfortunately, fluoride has a real downside to it. Fluoride is a neurotoxin. And this is interesting because if you look at the first uses that we're aware of, were fluoride. And by the way, they're not adding like sodium fluoride, like a natural salt. They're generally adding to water hydrosilica fluoride, which actually is a toxic side effect of the fertilizer industry. And this toxin used to be really hard to get rid of. They used to have to pay a lot of money to dispose of it safely. And then the genius idea came up to add it to drinking water. And suddenly, instead of companies having to spend a lot of money to get rid of this toxin, they could actually receive money and have it put in your drinking water with this dream that it will make your kids' teeth better. Fluoride also will integrate into bone, and that'll make your bones brittle. So you can get bones that are thicker, but they're actually more brittle, more prone to fractures. But I think the bigger concern with fluoride is its ability to act as a neurotoxin, to be toxic to nerve cells, including the ones in your brain. And for this reason, there are lots of studies that show fluoride in drinking water, especially in babies drinking water, can dramatically lower their intelligence for life. And this brings us to what I was mentioning, which is that the earliest recorded use we're aware of putting this hydrofluorosilicic acid in people's water was in concentration camps in the Soviet Union, because it made people a little more stupid and docile. So I don't know if that has anything to do with why it's in our drinking water. I mean, do we have a history of corrupted governments trying to keep us stupid and docile and sick? I'll leave that to our audience to consider. Just before we kind of wrap up this, what I'd like to focus on is that the benefits of fluoride in teeth at best are minimal, and if anything are with topical application. Although you have to be very careful, giving children nice, yummy tasting toothpaste that has fluoride in it and thinking, nah, they won't swallow it. What child swallows yummy things when it's in their mouth? It's a bit reckless. And so what we really need to do is think about water. How do we get water that doesn't have this neurotoxin added to it for our kids? And folks, unfortunately, a lot of those filters like your Brita, they just don't do it. It is very hard to remove fluoride from water. So the best thing is, don't put it in the first place. Or go get water somewhere that doesn't have it in it. Reverse osmosis and distillation can be fairly effective at that. But filters in general will not do it. And another thing is that we should consider is, this potential benefit. People are like, oh my God, I got to brush my kids' teeth with fluoride and make them drink fluoride, even if they're stupid. I want them to have good teeth. There's probably a much better choice that's coming around these days, which is you can now buy toothpaste that have hydroxyapatite in them. And hydroxyapatite is the stuff that teeth are made of. So instead of using fluoride to potentially harden and or make your teeth brittle and discolor them, you can brush with hydroxyapatite containing toothpaste. So I think on the subject of fluoride, that's my little brief introduction. And I'd like to hand it over to one of my colleagues for the next subject.
Mark, that was fascinating. I mean, that was just in that little time, the amount of information you managed to get in that's relevant, and starting off with taking us back to high school physics was quite a stroke of genius. So thank you very much for that. I must say, I remember, toothpaste aside, I remember having some sort of a flu at some stage of my life. And I went to a doctor when I used to do that. Don't do that anymore. And he recommended a fluoroquinolone, right? Ciprofloxacin, which has fluoride in it. And the adverse effects that drug causes are absolutely horrendous. I had so many of them that I ended up going to hospital to try and deal with the adverse effects because they were so overwhelming. And they include confusion, nausea, pain, allergic reaction, chest pain, dizziness, neuropathy, photosensitivity, abnormal heart rhythm, itching, low blood sugar, kidney, tendon rupture. I still have issues with tendons, agitation, breathing problems, joint problems, etc. And I remember asking this doctor how on earth, and I researched it to see at some stage there was, I think, a black box warning against ciprofloxacin. And I asked him, how on earth could you recommend this? And I sent him the article, and he never responded. So that was part of my journey of knowing not to rely on the allopathic system, and also learning about a community of people who say they've been floxed. So that's what it means when you've taken or been given ciprofloxacin without being warned and you experience adverse effects, you've actually been floxed. But of course, there are detox mechanisms and protocols that are available to heal and detox yourself of these toxic chemicals. I can't even call them medicines, some of which, of course, you'll find on the World Council for Health.org website. Any comments on Mark's presentation?
Well, I think you pretty much covered it, Mark. We all know about this, and there are even physical symptoms that people have, which I've actually noticed more when I've visited the States than anywhere else, which is when children actually have stained teeth because they have too much fluoride in their drinking water and toothpaste, etc., etc.
There's something very strange I encountered looking into the fluoride situation in Canada, and folks will probably know of Dr. Bob Dixon, who's been an advocate in the Calgary region for removal of fluoride from water for decades, which they succeeded in, although now there's efforts being made to put it back. Just as the EPA recognized fluoride as a toxin and to take it out of drinking water in the United States, the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta were involved in prosecuting Dr. Bob Dixon because he would open his mouth and thoughts that he had would come out about things like chemistry and science and medicine and not fluoridating kids' water. A very interesting thing that came across me, and forgive me for not having this person's name on the tip of my tongue, but it's on a post that I have on my site. But there's a member of she's a faculty member of the Department of Medicine in the University of Alberta and in the pediatrics department. And she is the big proponent of getting the fluoride back in there. She's the one there to criticize and lead the prosecution and persecution of good doctors like Dr. Dixon. The thing I found most unusual is, guess what? She's not. She's not a doctor. She's a lawyer. Why is a lawyer, a professor of pediatrics, teaching people and promoting fluoride in the water, and the one standing between Dr. Dixon, a medical doctor, and another scientist who've been very active on that? And I think what that should indicate to us, no surprise, folks, is if you look behind the curtain on fluoride, you're going to find a lot of strange creatures.
Thank you. Can I just say one more thing? Since when has government ever cared about us? Now they care about our teeth, so they put fluoride in the water. So ultimately, I mean, that's your red flag clue that this is actually just a neurotoxin and intended to make us submissive. Well, sorry for them. That's not happening. Christof.
Well, I'm sorry. Yeah.
On Christof. It was just very brief to say that very curiously in the UK there are only certain counties in which fluoridation had been practiced, very few. And in 2021, well, the pandemic was in full swing and people's minds were on other topics. The then Prime Minister, if you'd like to call him that, Boris Johnson, actually introduced the notion that the whole of the country was soon to have fluoridated water. Yeah.
I mean, I feel this topic could last the whole evening because it's so broad in its spectrum. Yeah, and thanks for doing such a concise and brilliant summary, Mark. To me, listening to a topic like it's always like listening to the same question over and over again. Well, unfortunately, we seem to have lost Mark now. Yeah. But I'd like to be able. He's back. Yeah. Is it safe and effective? I mean, if we're talking about something that we're all exposed to with our toothpaste and with our drinking water every day, we should make sure that it's safe and that it's effective. And unfortunately, dental decay is still the #1 issue of health problems for kids, and it still is the #1 reason for soldiers in the U.S. Army not to get deployed to a battlefield. Yeah, so clearly that one didn't work out because it hasn't saved the American nation or any other nation from tooth decay, because the origin of that is, as we know, sugar. Yeah. So if we look at the amount of money being spent on getting rid of the #1 enemy of our teeth and many other problems in our body, namely sugar, instead we have something to even make money out of the fact that the tooth decay in the first place. So very strange logic of our times.
It's very twisted, Christof. I mean, I recall as a child going to the dentist, and he was drilling holes in my teeth and filling me up with mercury, which seemed an odd thing to do. But he'd give me a nice big sugar-contained lollipop on the way out the door just to make sure I was back. Keeps me coming.
Yes, yeah, that seems to be the common money-making scheme of big pharma at the moment. Anyway, yeah, and not only talking of sugar. Anyway, yeah.
All right, shall we move on to our next mini presentation, the highlight reel on parasites? And, we're not talking about the oligarchy here. We're talking about more creepy crawly type of organisms and others. So take it away, Christof.
Yeah, Mark, do you mind putting up the slides? Yeah, here we go. Well, we'll come tonight to one other enemy of humanity, because we were first told bacteria are very, very bad for us. Then it was viruses, and of course parasites have the same fate. And it's all a military jargon, against all of these pathogens that are surrounding us. So if I could have the next slide, please. Yeah, so if we want to define what a parasite is, and Shabnam already had one definition of it, that it's an organism that lives on or in a host and extract nutrients from it. Yeah, so we have certain classification: protozoa, helminth, ectoparasites, and that we have to not know all of them, because the next thing, wherever you're watching this, if I could have the next slide, please, Mark, is just to know, depending on where you are, some of them are more common, and thus we have to know how to face them. And it's in North America, Giardia toxoplasma, pinworms and hookworms, and more from ticks, Babesia. In Europe, we have the Toxocara, the Echinococcus, the Giardia, and rare and more and more cases now of malaria. Yeah, and in Asia we have schistosoma, Clonorix ascaris, and endemic malaria, and others. And in Africa we have malaria, schistosoma, hookworms, trypanosoma, just to talk of the main ones, the cold sleeping sickness and the river blindness. And next one, please. And again, here we have thousands and thousands of parasites, but not all of them are harmful to us humans. Others might be harmful to other animals, but it's not that we could have to consider all of them as being a threat to our health. Malaria, of course, is not a nice one. Schistosoma is not a nice one that affects our liver and kidneys. Tapeworms, can be a problem. Toxoplasmosis can be a problem. Hookworms can be a problem, and Leishmania can be a problem. Can be a problem. Why? Because our state, the environment in our body, is determining how pathogenic a virus, a bacteria, or a parasite is. So one thing we know, that all of us mammals live in symbiosis with parasites all the time. Many mothers are so afraid of hearing the word worm in their children, and it seems to be almost a failure of motherhood in our modern hygienic world. If one of the kids has worms that are climbing out of an orifice of the body and give an itchy bum, which is one of the main symptoms that we have here in daily life, when a parasite, a worm, knocks on the door of a child here in Germany. But as we saw, they can affect many other symptoms and systems. And we are actually in a symbiosis, because our immune system is constantly modulating it, and parasites can actually help to suppress an overactive immune response. So they actually have a huge purpose in us. And the hygiene hypothesis that a lack of parasites could lead to autoimmune and allergic diseases actually has been proven now. Yeah, we know that helminths, and if they exist as a parasite in our body, we have less Crohn's disease. And we have parasites that actually modulate allergic asthma. And some of you might not find the thought very, very pleasing, but we actually experimented with it and had huge effects in actually getting worm eggs that you can buy in a pharmacy into the system of people with severe autoimmune diseases and allergies. And the differences were absolutely amazing. So you can actually use parasite as treatment. Yeah, so not many of you might think that's a very appealing thought, but if you look at the studies that are out there, you can actually have hundreds and thousands of studies showing the effect of autoimmune diseases, showing the effects on allergy prevention and allergy reduction, and the literature is actually full of it, showing that we actually can use them in order to help us to regulate not only the gut microbiomes or defense system, but the entire defense system in our body. So we have loads of drugs that were developed. I won't read out of them, all of them, but keeping in mind that that's where ivermectin, one medication that we've talked a lot about, has come from. But the huge problem is, like with anything that we see at the moment, we see that if you repeatedly give a vaccination to a body, it will switch antibodies. Yeah, it will go to an IgG4 response, and they will actually make your system not react to the wanted effect, but they will actually lessen it to dampen it down. Well, you know what? The same happens not only in terms of bacteria. Now we have created resistances towards viruses, towards bacteria, more and more antibiotic resistance bacteria, but the antiparasitic resistance that we have created in the last few decades, because if you repeatedly only give the one medication and you're only supposed to give them to animals 2 or 3 times a year, but most of them up to 11 times are given nowadays. And if you go to a vet nowadays, he will almost always recommend some antihelminthic therapy. We create the same thing. We create a huge crisis because we soon won't have any medications anymore. In some countries, like in South Africa or Paraguay, sheep already are completely resistant to any antiparasitic drug, because they've overdosed them. So we should at least consider this upcoming crisis, because we created it ourselves. And next slide, please, Mark. And next one, please. And next one, please. And next one, please. And that's the natural anthelmintics, because we actually have the tradition in almost all cultures on our planet to have nature's pharmacy serve us against parasites. Even here in Central Europe, 2 to 3 times a year, people got some herbs together. Even my grandmother did it, and that was black walnut or the Artemisia that's now banned in Europe, the pumpkin seeds, the garlic, and in South America, the papaya seeds. And you take them 2 to 3 times a year, which will decrease the amount of parasites and worms in your body, and thus make your body deal with it in a better way than completely destroying it, and as a collateral damage also destroy the entire microbiome. So this is another aspect that we have to think about. If we don't actually want to completely destroy our entire immune system, we should maybe work on balancing out in terms of what nature's pharmacy gives us, the presence of parasites in our body, as we should do with bacteria and viruses. So next one, please. So again, coming to the main problems that we have with parasites, we have the drug resistance. We also have changing we're not only talking about the Babazia that we talked about previously, and we have the lack of hygiene, still a huge problem, because most of them do stem from water and water management against mosquitoes. If we look at Africa, resting water is still the main breeding ground of mosquitoes, and that's being created whenever water spills. So one big road that the WHO could take in order to fight malaria is to look at the water management and the hygiene. And we're living, in the next one, please, Mark. Next slide. And actually, so the aim of us should be to live in harmony with parasites instead of fighting them like we're currently doing with everything that's supposed to attack our body. And we should look at all parasites not as harmful, because others are really, really very, very useful to our body. And let's look for the main reasons that we have also had to look in terms of the big infectious diseases. It's hygiene, and we should actually look in terms of research, because not much money is going into that area either anymore, to explore the therapeutic potential and how to keep ourselves living in balance with them. So the future perspective should actually include the traditional knowledge and with modern medicine, if the situation gets out of hand. And the next one, please. So our final conclusion, that parasites are diverse and they have both sides. They can be harmful, but they can be very beneficial. And if we understand them and accept them as part of us, it can lead to better treatments and coexistent. And we should encourage research that involves the actual causes when something goes wrong, improve hygiene, and actually improve nutritional status, and explore and act with the knowledge of all the cultures that have traditionally used natural remedies. And we know this is a big problem because you can't make any money out of it. But don't forget, there is a better way, and I'll hand it over to the others now.
Well, it's very enlightening, Christof. I wasn't as aware of the potential benefits of parasites, especially for autoimmune diseases and inflammatory conditions. So please, I'm going to have to get you to share more of that so I can study deeper into it. I'm curious, Christof, we're used with horses. It's old practice on the farm, right? Every 6 months or so, you give a horse could be one of a variety of medicines, often ivermectin. You give them a paste just to deworm them, and real simple thing. That's good. Get rid of the worms. So I'd love to hear your comment on that as a practice, and is there a practice like that we should consider in humans, or a balanced version of that? Is there a benefit to doing something to reduce the parasite load, or to reduce some parasite loads that you might do on a routine basis, rather than only when a child wakes up with an itchy bum and pinworms coming out at night?
Well, thanks for that question, because it actually led me to the topic of parasites many, many years ago when I was treating horses. And in some stables that I was in, they repeatedly talked of losing some horses when the dewormer came along. That's in the biggest stables. They have quite severe side effects. I was already talking about the ineffectiveness of them. being one problem, because they are often used. You should always switch the antiparasitic medication, by the way. You should not stick to one because it will create a resistance. But when looking further into that, I contacted people that have very, very expensive horses. Yeah. So they always look for the best options. And you know what? Yeah, I found some of the breeders of the most amazing horses on this planet that went away completely from the deworming. Instead, they used antiparasitic plants, which was the old technique. Yeah, the old shepherds still knew it, and the old farmers still knew it. You would take one part of your of the area where your horses would graze, and then put all kinds of antiparasitic drugs, herbs onto that. And once a month, you would just get them in there for 1 or 2 days, and they would feed on all the antiparasitic plants. And that would be enough to completely control it. So that's one thing. Yeah, you could actually include an antiparasitic way of dealing with your animals. That's one thing that we've tried. Yeah, but we had a few break-ins into that area, and everything was destroyed overnight by some wild animals, because some of them were quite yummy as well. And the other thing is that I developed a protocol that my entire family, my sheep, my goats, my dogs, my cats, all of us are doing 3 times a year. And that's a protocol of some of the things that I stated. It's papaya seeds, very, very effective. You probably know of them, Mark. Yeah, in South America, there's coconut oil, there's Artemisia in it, there is pumpkin seeds in it, there's a bit of carrot juice in it, there's werewolf in it, and all of them have a synergistic action, and they work extremely well, are just completely plant-based. And if it works for our donkeys, yeah, it sure should work for us, and I think it does.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Christof. I just wanted to actually thank you for bringing back the whole topic of the way that we've actually co-evolved with all these larger and smaller beings, and they all serve a purpose. And one of the things that fascinated me in the last years is the way parasites actually absorb or store within themselves, inside your body, heavy metals. And this is really quite a fascinating topic. And that's also why, if people do have a lot of parasites and they remove them, they can feel quite ill, because the heavy metals are then coming out of the dying parasites. So it's always an interesting topic. How are they helping us? Because that's perhaps another way that we can be thinking about and looking at as rather useful when we live in environments that are really rather toxic with lots of heavy metals.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're just starting to understand our symbiosis with all the bacteria out there. We're just starting to understand. And if you talk of the real enlightened people when it comes to the microbiome, I was recently talking to Dr. Dr. Hazen, who is an amazing mind when it comes to our microbiome. And even she admits that we're just at the beginning. We don't even know anything, about the synergy of everything that lives in our body, and even outnumbers our own cell numbers. And if you think that 6 to 9% at least of our genome once was a virus that was integrated. I know I'm kicking off another big topic in a moment, but that the genetic material comes from them. We are not even close to understanding what parasites, what important role parasites are playing in our system. But one thing that, Mark, that maybe overlaps with your topic, and therefore I found your question very interesting with the horses. Isn't it interesting that we basically integrated Big Pharma in so many ways of our lives and accepted it, as being a norm, whatever you put on the toothpaste of our children, whatever we give our horses or dogs, whatever we inject in them on a regular basis, this has become the norm. We have to fight for another opinion that has been the norm for 99.999% of life on this planet, which I always find very interesting. How did that ever happen? How did that ever happen, that we consider all of these medical interventions, and some of them with quite severe side effects, as we were just talking here tonight, as the norm? So
and
the Rockefeller influence is certainly a part of it.
And I just wanted to mention that one other point that we often don't think about from an evolutionary perspective is that none of us, humans or animals, ever stayed sitting in their own feces, basically. We were nomads and we moved on. And that's the nature of the big herds in Africa to this day, where they still have corridors to get through, frontiers and huge, towns and things. And we kept moving, basically. So we didn't have the problem until we became sedentary and living in villages, where we suddenly had to deal with accumulated numbers of parasites, because we were basically surrounded by our own waste material. And if you look at the work of Joel Salatin, the wonderful farmer who's done so much work on how to maintain a healthy, ecologically sound farm that respects human and animal and nature, all life, his system is to run the cows in a paddock for 3 weeks, and then no more you can't have, because the parasite life cycle is 3 weeks. And then they go into the next paddock, and he developed these amazing chicken coops on wheels. So you trundle along with your chicken coop, pop the chicken into the field that the cows have left, and the chicken get very fat and healthy on the protein from any parasites that are in any of the waste material. And therefore, the cows or the sheep or the goats don't reinfect themselves, because they've moved on, so they're not walking in their own mess, and so on and so forth. And this is one of the reasons that cattle and animals who are raised in intensive areas, like the dreadful feedlots, of which I've seen photos, luckily never in person, because I don't think I'll get over it. But that's why they're so heavily treated constantly with dewormers and antibiotics and because they're basically standing in their own waste all day, and that's what their whole life is.
Thanks for that comment, Francesca, because what we're basically doing, we're now looking at the bird flu, and is it normal that we now cull millions and millions of chicken, in order to prevent them from spreading a disease, which could be in any animal flying anywhere? Or should we find it normal that we should just get the infection in, with the risk of losing some, but with the benefit that the ones that survive will be resistant and will form the future? And of course, I was talking to a farmer today, and she said, well, there's a 4-point staging of animal welfare in Europe in action at the moment, and I didn't quite know the criteria, but when she started with class 1, which means that a cow has 2 square meters to live, I didn't want to know more. the stress, the stress and the suppressed immune system, and I'm not even talking about the emotions and the thoughts of the animal, in 2 square meters for the rest of its life before it's being slaughtered, and that this will create new diseases, will create parasitic infections, viral infections, bacterial infection, is almost too logical to say anything about it. And as you said, if you look at the cycle out there and look at all the creatures, even birds that feed, you mentioned the chicken, it's a lot of wild birds that feed on the parasites of the animals, and create an entire ecosystem. Just looking at the feces of cows, that actually is the breeding ground for so many insects out there, and instead of having them in huge farms and dumping the whole thing in big silos, and then we don't know what to do with it. It's the perversion that, with the scare, that the fear that's being created is actually created by ourselves, the way we treat our animals, and that's hard to watch.
If I can come in with a couple of comments before we hear from Francesca on mold, to say that I'm so glad you naturally highlighted ivermectin. Robert Campbell, who co-discovered ivermectin with Professor Satoshi Omura, suggested to Merck, this was in the 1980s, that ivermectin be used for parasitic infections. And then Merck decided, labeled it Mectizan and made it available in Africa, and it's treated millions of people. There's been, in 2011, it was 800 million doses. It's certainly more now, at 80 million people. But it's been used in various countries from Ghana to Niger, and it's seen an enormous amount of success. And there was actually a film that was made, a 30-minute film, which is very difficult to find. We have screened it as part of World Ivermectin Day before, through World Council for Health. And so we know that these medicines exist. And of course, many of them are natural homeopathic medicines, and others, discovered in the soil and turned into a molecule that can be then used as a medicine. Also, to share very quickly, just from an international perspective, we focused, you and I, Christof, are working on an article currently on the recklessness of the WHO's polio vaccination campaign in Palestine, in Gaza in particular. And Dr. Suzanne Humphreys, who did an interview with our allies at CHD TV, talked about all the pathogens. She talked about melting buildings, melting plastic, electricity, chemicals, etc. But she also talks about what's really causing paralysis, and about all of the different environmental factors. And we know, because of the destruction of infrastructure, hygiene infrastructure, water and sanitation, that no doubt there are very high levels of parasites in the area as well that are afflicting these children, whose immune systems are already damaged. So of course, giving them oral polio vaccine drops or anything else really in that region is going to be very, very dangerous. And Dr. Mark Trozzi also weighed in on that subject and highlighted the recklessness of people like Bill Gates. And finally, just to mention that Burkina Faso is doing some amazing work in the area of infrastructure development, where they have said to the neo-colonialists in the form of exploitative corporations, leave. We will do business on our terms. We will sell our goods on our terms. And we will rather invest in building our infrastructure. So water, sanitation, electricity, communications, non-GMO food, etc. So hopefully we're starting to see a turnaround in terms of hygiene infrastructure in Africa, or at least in the Horn of Africa, that should lead to better health outcomes, because we know that there are socioeconomic determinants of health. So hopefully Burkina Faso is going to be a shining example for the rest of Africa, and maybe other parts of the world, certainly some very pioneering developments in Burkina Faso.
Great to hear.
And with that being said, unless there are any comments on that, shall we hand over to Francesca?
Thank you very much, Shabnam. I was just thinking, since I'm going to introduce briefly the topic of mold, and it is mentioned in some of the guides that we now have available, And obviously it's something that has to do with detox as well. So I wondered if Mark would like to just introduce the detox study briefly before I look at the molds. Was that it? Okay.
The short version, Francesca.
Okay, all right, over to me. Well, I just have a brief introduction to mold, which is to continue on this theme of, you know, what are things that can affect our health. And molds, for those of us that maybe haven't looked into it in any depth, besides knowing that maybe we've got a moldy bathroom or something, the mold is actually a fungus. And as a fungus, as a mushroom might do, they actually reproduce like mushrooms by sending spores out through the air and particles. And another amazing figure about molds is that there may be thousands of parasites, but it would appear that there are 3 to 5 million species of molds. And again, we know about some of them, but not about all of them, and we probably don't know anywhere near as much as we could do. Of these various millions, several hundred are considered or known to be pathogenic today. In actual fact, it's again a similar discussion to parasites with molds, in the sense that one can be affected by molds when one has a poorly functioning immune system. That's the most serious problem, as well as there are some pointers towards genetic factors that make some people more susceptible to being affected by them. So most healthy people won't react to molds, but if your immune system's weak or there's a pre-existing condition, then you can be affected. And there are so many different symptoms that people might put down to something completely different. But if the house is moldy, there may be reason to look into it. So the usual things are nasal and sinus congestion, hay fever, sore throats, coughs, headaches, you know, perpetual coughs that never seem to go away, irritation in the eyes, rashes, aches and pains, chronic fatigue, even when you get into a more serious situation. Asthma has been linked to molds, more serious or chronic asthma conditions, as well as depression, brain fog, and so something like asthma, for instance, can be made worse if the person's immune system's low, and then they have created a sensitization to the aspergillus. And this is spoken about in many studies, and it can be tested for to see if the person actually has antibodies to aspergillus, for instance, which is your typical black mold, but black bathroom or kitchen mold. You can also have things like fungal toenails, or quite often people talk about candida, which is actually not a mold, in the same breath as actual molds. And candida is a yeast, but they, as I'll discuss in a little bit, they can actually work together to create a more difficult situation. So the classic mold, as everyone's aware, is they can be greenish, greyish, brownish, blackish, with spots on windowsills or bathrooms, and filaments. They come in dots or clusters and growths, and common varieties are Aspergillus, the black mold, or Penicillium, which is a greener type variety. But one of the really interesting things, and it goes back to what Christof was saying, is that molds are there. We've co-evolved with them, and they have an incredibly important role in nature and ecosystems, because molds actually move in to decompose old and rotting matter. If we did not have molds, we would all be living in not skyscrapers of cement and glass, but skyscrapers of undecomposed dead matter. So a very strange thought indeed. And so why would it be then that we're in a situation where we do worry about molds, and we've moved away from just accepting that they decompose things, and that's very useful? Well, it's because we live in houses, and modern houses, which are particularly well sealed to meet the state energy functionality requirements. You know, those charts A to F, how well your house is doing energetically, and sooner or later you might get fined, you know, if you don't have your house's energy at a certain level between A and C. So these very well sealed houses, because there's no air circulation, they are actually more prone to mold. And most people have come across it in their showers, air units, any warm or damp place in and around the home, or outside the home in an old log pile if you haven't burnt your wood over the winter. And they molds love cellulose, so they will go onto wooden windowsills and anything made of chipboard, like the structure under your bathtub or something. And they do also like gathering inside the human body in certain conditions. And those conditions are usually these problems to do with lowered immunity and so on. You can, however, always smell mold. It's almost impossible not to walk into a home and notice that there's a moldy smell. You might not be able to see it, but almost everyone can smell if something's moldy. It's a very strong reaction because many molds are not good for us, so we would avoid eating them in a natural setting anyhow. We don't eat moldy or rotting fruit. And so if you can smell it, it's there. And you have to keep looking for it and see where the water leak is, etc., etc. And you can test to see if you have a mold condition. There are mycotoxin panels that you can do in certain labs. You can also do organic acid testing. The organic acid testing will reveal if there's very high levels of certain organic acids that are prevalent in molds. So that's how you'd find out. And also ELISA testing panels with urine samples, and as well some natural health practitioners would test with intestinal microbial overgrowth testing, which can pick up some of these things. And what mold doesn't like is oxygen and alkalinity. So going back time and time again to the, you know, eat plenty of raw food, eat a plant-based diet, lots of exercise, fresh air. Supporting the immune system is the first port of call if you feel you have any of these symptoms, or if you have a weak immune system. And there are many natural remedies for it, but before I talk about the remedies, which are simple and straightforward, very much like in the case of parasites, which we've used for aeons in natural and traditional medicinal ways, herbal. One of the things that is interesting about mold infections, and the reason they're often discussed in correlation with Candida, which is a yeast, and a lot of people have heard about Candida infections and how it manifests by getting oral thrush, or you can get a fungal toenail or fingernail where it discolors. You can get thrush infections and different things like that. And that's a sign of a Candida infection. Now, if you have a Candida infection and you go to a natural health practitioner and they say to you, okay, well, let's try and resolve this, and they put you on a Candida diet with no sugar, etc., because yeasts love the sugar. So do molds and parasites. They all the things we don't like hanging around us too much love sugar. So when the Candida infection has been dealt with, and it comes back as soon as you stop the program, there's been shown very much to be a correlation between a systemic mold infection, which is underlying the Candida infection. So the mold can actually grow in the gut. I mean, Aspergillus or something like that can actually grow in the gut if the diet's very poor and lots of ultra processed foods and sugars and fast foods and all of these things. The mycotoxins in the molds lower the immune system sufficiently that the Candida, which is a species that we all carry in our miraculous gut flora, will multiply because the immune system's down. So it's opportunistic and it decides it'd like a few more pals around, and it'll expand. And so that's an interesting point to be made. If you have recurring Candida infections that don't seem to go away, well, then that's one thing to look underneath. So with molds, the remedies are, Christof already mentioned raw garlic, for instance, 2 to 4 grams a day, and you can mix it in with other things like Christof's special remedy, which I hope he's going to share with us, his 2 or 3 times a year, let's deparasite the whole camp. I'd like to hear about that. And there are other things like oregano oil as well, which is a very common, powerful antifungal, antiviral, antiparasitic, often used for these purposes, to remove the toxins, because the toxins that the molds produce are what lower the immune system and create an overload on the liver and on our detoxification capacities. So what's very useful to remove toxins is activated charcoal. It's a classic thing used to remove toxins from the body, including in cases of alcohol poisoning in hospitals. Bentonite clay. Bentonite clay is a classic form of clay that actually, like charcoal, binds to toxins in the gut, including heavy metals and mycotoxins, and then they're accompanied out in the stool. Chlorophyll and spirulina. So I mean chlorophyll, which is the green pigment that plants use to photosynthesize with, and that is very predominant in spirulina and chlorella, and accompanied by green juices as well. So juices where there's no fruits and no sugars, but cucumber, celery, kale, spinach, all the dark greens, even rocket, which would make it very peppery, but it's possible. Also the removing of all the sugar, because molds do like sugar, like I said, and using alkalizers like baking soda, and consuming healing foods. Like one of the classic healing things is to have for the gut is bone broth, because bone broth has many of the ingredients that help the gut wall be replaced and rebuilt. So it reduces inflammation and helps the reconstruction of the gut. So also for treating molds, grapefruit seed extract's another good one, which is a gentler approach. And grapefruit seed extract is antifungal, antiviral, antibacterial. It's an excellent thing that I happen to always have a 30 milliliter bottle whenever I travel anywhere, because if you have any kind of tummy bug or traveler's diarrhea, it puts paid to it almost instantly. Tea tree oil is another good one, and a hydrogen peroxide. And also, when you're actually looking at your home and you know that you've got the molds there, you have to really go on a serious detective work, not just internally if you're suffering from ill health because of it, but externally. You have to find out where the leaks are, you have to fix the leaks, you have to ventilate the house. You have to check your air conditioning units to make sure that there's not mold growing there, and literally having the spores blown through your rooms in your house every day. You need to get rid of moldy items. Some items you simply cannot recover because they're so impregnated with mold. So if you leave them in the house, the whole cycle will repeat itself. So things like carpets and pillows and chipboards, furniture, if they're impregnated with what mold, they have to be got rid of. And then you can clean with alcohol vinegar, hydrogen peroxide. You can also use tea tree oil mixed with warm water to spray. If you really can't get rid of it, you can try bleach, but of course that's actually not so nice to inhale and things. So it's better to go for the natural substances unless you're in a real pickle, because bleach is that much more aggressive. So that's it in a nutshell. That's the situation with molds. We've evolved with them. They're essential to our life on this planet, but they can affect us if we ourselves are living in circumstances that are unnatural, like closed, damp spaces, and or we have a lowered immune system for some reason.
Thank you, Francesca. That was fascinating, and I was listening with attention because I've been fighting this issue for some time now. So I've heard that when you use vinegar or hydrogen peroxide or bleach, it multiplies the mold spores, because we've tried that and we're still having that issue. I certainly feel some of the physical symptoms, such as fatigue and an antihistamine reaction and a chronic cough. So I've heard that those things make the mold expand or multiply more. So can you comment on that? And also, I've been using colloidal silver spray to help with the persistent cough. Is that something that can help, or is there something more effective for the chronic cough?
I think not on its own, but in mixtures, the colloidal silver can work with other elements. Now, what you said about expanding the mold by spraying it with different substances, I think the worst thing one can do is have a shower in a moldy shower unit, because the hot water and the steam actually make the mold release the spores into the air, and you breathe them in. You can't see them because they're too small, and then you breathe them in. So, but when it depends how you're applying the products to the moldy area. So if you're concerned about that because you can't control the way you're spraying it or something, you can just soak a cloth with hydrogen peroxide and place it on the area for half an hour until it's done its job of getting rid of the mold, and then carefully wipe it down. But I certainly would always be careful when dealing with mold to to deal with it in a way where you're not leaning over it and inhaling. That's for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Any other comments or questions on the subject of mold? It's fascinating, isn't it? It's a tiny little thing that you can barely see on its own, and yet it has such an enormous impact on our health. I'm hoping that people watch this episode again. It's going to help you out with your health.
I have one little comment. I mean, really, Francesca, great presentation, lots of information, and you did mention this. I just want to highlight for people because, damp areas with poor air circulation is a great place, as Francesca said, for mold to grow. And certainly in Canada, a cold country where a lot of the year you have lots of closed spaces, and you can end up with damp spaces that can be very challenging. And a real simple thing is mold won't grow if the air is moving. So, we use it a lot. For instance, if we have storage rooms, survival storage rooms, these are places where, you can easily get mold growing on your food stores, which in addition to the air effects that you were talking about, Francesca, is not good for your food. And a real simple trick is get a fan in there and just position that fan. You don't need tons of air movement, but just keep the air moving. And so even if you have, like Francesca said, you get, cabinets made out of the cheap particle board, it's under a kitchen sink, there's a slight leaking or even just humidity on the pipes. This is a real setup for mold. And a real simple solution, whether it's short-term or long-term, is get a fan under there and get the air moving. And that will really make it hard for that mold to grow.
Yeah, I once was watching a very interesting YouTube video where they just impregnated mold on the tip of a little needle to make it radioactive, and so it could be followed in the room. And it was absolutely staggering. Just one little pin like that, they blew on it, and the entire room was full of mold particles flying around. It was a very impressive
Wow.
video that really changed the way I looked at mold after that. And thank you for your brilliant presentation, Francesca, and thanks for pointing out again that even there, mold is not only something we have to combat, but yet to live in cooperation with. Of course, you don't want it in your house, you don't want it on your food, etc. We did loads of things, and we did mold tests that you give people into their homes and see whether something grows on it. Yeah, that usually is a quite a reliable way to test it. And here we have a different climate. Yeah, so if it's in the house, it's very hard to get out of the house. You can't just open, like at Mark's place, the windows and the doors and wait for the ventilation to kick in when it's -5 degrees outside. That will create another problem. But one thing maybe I can suggest here, we actually advise people to get UV lamps together that produce ozone. Very inexpensive things. You put them in a room, and then they produce ozone, so isolate the room very well. You put it on a timer, and you put it on a timer for maybe 8 to 12 hours in a room. Lock the room so nobody gets in there, and the UV light will kill everything that is circulating around it, and the ozone will be like a gas. Is a gas that distributes itself and is reactive and kills the mold everywhere. Then you open the doors and the room is basically mold free. So that's a very inexpensive way. It costs about $20 to buy it, and that's something we recommend here in our climate, just to add to it.
Well, I must certainly say, I think we're learning as much from each other as people who are watching right now or who will watch it later are going to learn. So it's really quite a fascinating session, and I'm just so much in awe of all of your knowledge and your skills and your generosity of spirit. I think I'm going to go last. I'm going to talk about some legal initiatives and advocacy efforts around these three topics of mold, parasites, and fluoride. But before we do that, I think it's really important to highlight our wonderful detox study and guide. It's a new initiative from World Council for Health, pioneering as usual, bringing together some of the best protocols through our country councils and friends to help you detox should you need to do so from not only things such as pharmaceutical products or injections, perhaps other environmental toxins and pathogens that might be bothering you. And the best part is you can participate in the study. So you can record which of these protocols are working for you and how. This is a people-led study. It's not led by Big Pharma. It's not led by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's led by the World Council for Health and people like you. So please participate in the study and do support the guide that is available on the website. Let's have a look at a very clever 1-minute animation so you can find out more.
Are you ready to take control of your health and well-being? If you are not feeling yourself or know someone else who isn't, then the World Council for Health invites you to join our groundbreaking study on detox and well-being. This comprehensive study offers you science-backed insights on the benefits of detoxing, cleansing your body, boosting your energy, and optimizing your health. All you need to do to participate is 1. Download our Detox and Wellbeing Guide. 2. Select one of the expert international detox protocols. 3. Report back on your progress once weekly for 8 weeks. And that's it. Our friendly team will accompany you on your detox journey. Your participation will help you and others, as your valuable feedback will identify which of our protocols are the most effective. Now is the time to take back control of your health and well-being. So sign up and recommend this vital study to your family and friends. Together with the support of the World Council for Health and the Control Group, we can create a better way for a better world.
Detoxstudy.org. Fantastic. What an exciting initiative. And that really is participatory democracy, right? Unlike what is offered or not offered by the WHO. We're going to move on to now my very brief presentation on legal and advocacy efforts in respect of mold, parasites, and fluoride. And then we're going to hear some very exciting announcements on what's coming up in the near future. And we'll be closing off with a beautiful song selected especially for you, the 99%. So I'm going to ask our technical producer to please share the slides with us if possible. I think it might just be a little easier in case I have a technical glitch, if it's possible, or if not, I can certainly try. And here we go. I'm going to try that again, Mark. If you have more success than me, you're welcome to share it. And if you are watching live, to share insights from your part of the world as to what people are using and how is it working in terms of mold, parasites, and fluoride, and any other pathogens such as heavy metals and plastics. So I'm going to try sharing that again. And here we go. Okay. I'm hoping you can see this. Is it visible? Yes?
There we go. We see it. Excellent. We
Super.
sort of see the whole screen, so maybe if there's a way to kind of blow it up and focus it in.
Oh, jeepers. I don't know what it's doing now. I tried to do that, and then it did all sorts of funny things. Is this super tiny? Let me try and do that. Does that help? Or is it still too small?
It works. It's just we see the panel of your slides coming and the one slide that you're on. But I think
Yeah.
I think we can work with it. This is evidence that we don't have a $9 billion gluttonous budget like the WHO.
Exactly.
That and the fact that people that follow get healthy instead of dying. That's the other great sign.
Yeah. That's a green flag in itself. So I'm going to try sharing again to avoid that weird thing happening, but it's still sharing. Let me try. And of course, please feel free to support the amazing work that we do at World Council for Health. It's doing the same thing again. I don't know. Okay, let's go for it. Mold, parasites, and fluoride legal and advocacy efforts worldwide. It wasn't doing this earlier. Of course, the gremlins are attacking. Nevertheless, let's talk about some legal efforts in respect of mold, whether you spell it M-O-L-D or M-O-U-L-D. In South Africa, activists have pushed for stronger health and safety regulations. These are essential to have regulations put in place, in particular in government buildings or any other place of employment. The Health and Safety Act is a key tool in demanding more attention on mold in the workplace. In India, urban areas like Mumbai and Kolkata face significant mold issues due to the tropical climate. So there's often flooding that happens in this part of the world. Environmental groups are working with local governments to create better housing standards and to raise awareness about the risks of mold, particularly in post-flood conditions. And the floods are really, really intense. So you would imagine the amounts of mold that will be existing in people's homes, in their work environments, in schools, in government buildings, in recreational areas. So it certainly is an exacerbating factor when it relates to health. And it's so good to see that there are these efforts that are happening. In the US and Canada, there's significant litigation surrounding mold, M-O-L-D, in rental properties. For example, the St. Paul Fire and Marine Insurance Company versus Oak Park Mall 2006 case set a precedent for landlord liability regarding mold contamination. Very important because it creates a responsibility on the landlords to make sure that the premises that they lease do not contain mold. Similarly, in Canada, the British Columbia Human Rights Tribunal ruled in 2016 that landlords must address mold-related health risks in rental properties. And we're so thankful to courts that make good decisions like these. In Australia and New Zealand, particularly along coastal cities, naturally, mold is a pervasive issue, leading to advocacy from the Australian Environmental Health Practitioners Association. New Zealand has also taken steps to improve housing standards, especially after, again, flooding exacerbated the mold problems in areas like Auckland. So you would have an additional challenge, or if your area is prone to...
Christof, are you the slide?
What's happening? I can't see anyone right now. I can only see my slides.
I'm having a little technical issues, folks. A little
Oh, we're not seeing the slide right now?
No, not at the moment.
Okay.
What happened? Hello just to keep us rolling.
Okay.
There.
Should I just carry on?
Yes. Can you see the slides that are on the screen?
Yeah, I can see it on my side, and I can't see anyone
I think
else.
what's happening, I think that Mark Lawrie has got the slides working on his end now, so you're getting better appearance of the slides. And
okay, so let me stop sharing mine and come back to that one. Yeah, that looks better.
Yeah, and then you can probably just guide him to the slide you're on.
Okay. So thanks, Mark. Australia and, well, both Marks have New Zealand, as we said, flooding. So certainly, again, there are socioeconomic determinants of health. If you're living in an area that is prone to flooding and steps are not taken to protect you in terms of environmental health, that is a problem and has to be taken into consideration in terms of health and safety legislation. Looks like I can move the slides. Great. At other advocacy efforts, the Environmental Health Coalition in the US, which has successfully campaigned for stronger building codes and tenant protections. Landlords cannot just get away with leasing, whether it's homes or it's work environments, without having all of these protections complied with. Similarly, groups in Nigeria, like Environmental Rights Action, advocate for better housing policies and health surveillance in urban areas with inadequate infrastructure. So again, if infrastructure related to hygiene, related to water and sanitation, for example, is not in place, you're going to experience most likely issues related to mold, and have to engage in legal and/or advocacy efforts. With regards to parasites legal efforts, the European Union, in the EU, regulations like that very long one, 852/2004, on food hygiene aims to prevent parasitic infections in food, particularly in meats. Countries like Germany and France have strong legal frameworks to control parasites in food. But obviously, it means you have to have regulatory authorities that are ethical, that are not prone to accepting bribes or being intimidated easily. In Latin America, in Brazil and Mexico, cases concerning malaria and schistosomiasis have led to stronger government interventions such as mandatory treatments and vector control measures. These legal frameworks aim to reduce the burden of parasitic diseases in these endemic regions. That certainly does make sense, although I would be a bit concerned about mandatory treatments, and we certainly need to look into what exactly that means. Is it natural products? Is it ivermectin? What is it exactly? Legal efforts, again, in terms of parasites in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa, parasitic diseases like schistosomiasis and onchocerciasis, river blindness, are major health concerns, right? We talked about ivermectin earlier on to help treat river blindness successfully. Legal frameworks here focus on meeting WHO guidelines for parasitic disease control. I'm not sure the WHO has even considered some of the treatments we talked about earlier, such as the papaya and pumpkin seeds, or the Artemisia, for example. Legal frameworks here in Uganda, international collaborations have been vital in combating these diseases through large-scale treatment programs. So in Uganda, ivermectin, for example, is definitely used. So it's also used in Nigeria and other parts of the African continent. In India, malaria remains a significant issue because it's a very tropical climate. It's very hot, and there's often a lot of flooding, as I mentioned earlier. So the National Vector-Borne Disease Control Program focuses on mosquito control, and legal frameworks ensure that local governments implement strategies to reduce transmission. Obviously, with most of your workforce being afflicted by some sort of malaria-related disease, your economy is going to suffer. There certainly is an impetus, not only for the governments in India or the people of India, but people around the world, to make sure that there is significant control and legal frameworks to reduce transmission. In terms of advocacy, here's some examples. The Cancer Center and Doctors Without Borders play major roles in combating parasitic diseases in Africa, providing deworming programs and advocating for better sanitation and healthcare. Hopefully, some of that advocating includes advocating for these African countries to have ownership over their resources so that they can build better infrastructure, in particular in relation to water and sanitation and electricity. South Africa has seen advocacy from groups like the South African Federation of Trade Unions. Trade unions, of course, still enormously popular and effective, pushing for better health standards in informal settlements where parasitic infections are rampant. So informal settlements is where the majority of people in our country actually live, otherwise known as shack settlements, or as they call them in Latin America or Brazil, the favelas. So there's little to no infrastructure. It's just sand. People build their, let's call it huts for now, kind of structures where you are prone again to fires and flooding, and of course everything that comes with that, including parasitic infection. So a lot of work needs to happen in these areas, not only preventative and treatment, but advocating for people to actually have decent homes, which is, I would say, the sign of a civilized society. People being homeless, which is what I consider shack settlements and informal settlements to be, is not the sign of a civilized society. Now, thirdly, with regard to fluoride, some of the legal activities and initiatives in the US, one of the most significant legal cases concerning fluoride is one that happened in 2018, Environmental Working Group versus the EPA, on standards of fluoride levels in drinking water. So this case highlighted concerns about fluoride's potential health risks, particularly for children. And then, as many of us may remember, in the health freedom space, in September last year, very exciting, a federal judge ruled that the EPA must strengthen its regulations on fluoride level in public water based on emerging scientific evidence linking fluoride to neurodevelopmental issues in children, which we've been talking about for a really long time. This ruling was seen as a major victory for anti-fluoride advocates, actually covered in The Guardian, surprise, surprise. At a state level, advocacy following that court decision, states like Arkansas and Kentucky have begun drafting bills to limit or ban the practice of water fluoridation. These actions reflect growing concerns about the potential risks of fluoride exposure. So we're hoping that the September 2024 and the 2018 decision are going to have a ripple effect across all states in the United States of America, but also around the world, because now we have case precedents that can be used in challenging fluoride in the water, in the toothpaste, and whatever else they're adding it to. Let's go to India now. Natural fluoride contamination in groundwater has led to widespread fluorosis in rural areas like Rajasthan and Telangana. Legal measures have been put in place to treat water supplies and provide health care for affected populations. But the problem remains because these are rural areas, again, lacking in decent and adequate infrastructure. In these regions, advocacy for safe water has been central. Organizations like Fluoride Knowledge Network pushing for stronger regulation of groundwater fluoride levels. So you would imagine, how does it get into the groundwater? Quite likely, you have corporations, unethical ones, that are releasing chemicals, including fluoride, into the water. And they get away with it by setting up their operations in rural areas such as Rajasthan and Telangana. Quite a common practice. People sometimes don't know what's causing the illness. But I must say, from South African experience, people living in poor and rural areas have certainly caught up. They're highly intelligent. They can see what's going on and they know how to organize. In China, excessive fluoride in drinking water has been linked to serious health issues in rural communities. Again, right? They don't have access to the kind of materials that people living in urban areas do, for example. Legal efforts have resulted in government intervention to reduce fluoride exposure, with programs aimed at providing defluoridated water to affected areas. But we've got to keep testing, because you never know. They could introduce it again, right? And so testing and constant monitoring and evaluation is incredibly important. Now, the Fluoride Action Network has been one of the most vocal organizations in advocating against water fluoridation. Their campaigns focus on the potential risks of fluoride, including established neurological damage and bone health issues. And they found strong support in countries like Australia and the US, which have successfully pushed for bans or moratoriums. So you would imagine that you have an entire nation of people experiencing neurological damage and bone health issues, which makes it so much easier for the oligarchy running the governments to be able to impose tyranny on the population. In South Africa, advocacy against water fluoridation has been led by local environmental and health groups, arguing that it exacerbates health inequalities because health is a human right. It's not in isolation to all of our other human rights. It absolutely is one of the pivotal and fundamental human rights that we have, and that clean water access should be the priority over adding chemicals like fluoride. I mean, this should be common sense, right? But clearly there's people or parties making money of insisting that water needs fluoride because they care so much about our teeth. So I want to talk now, if we could stop this slide. I don't know whose that was, mine or yours, Mark, but I want to come back to talk about some strategies really briefly, done with the presentation side of things. So what can we actually do, right? That's what we're all about at the World Council for Health. We'll share the information about what's going on. We'll analyze it, and then we'll share some potential solutions with you so you can hopefully use them in your part of the world. So I'm going to move to that document now, and let's talk about some of the strategies that you could use. And these would include both legal strategies as well as advocacy strategies. So the document is being a little evasive. There we go. We've got it now. Great. So depending on which part of the world you're in, we face similar challenges with government corruption, with a lack of education, and sometimes with courts that really don't understand these issues. So some of the strategies that we use will be common in our regions, and some will be based on your own set of dynamics in your country, your region, your part of the world. So let's talk about some of these strategies here. There are certainly international legal action initiatives that can be taken. For example, relying on treaties and conventions, such as the Framework Convention on Health and others, to create binding agreements that require nations to take actions to prevent some of these issues, including but not limited to parasitic infections. That does, however, come with issues because many of these international institutions are, as we know, compromised. And so therefore, they might be pushing pharmaceutical products in an effort to sell more of their products and do this through international agreements. So again, decentralizing and using strategies that are national community-based are certainly the best. In terms of mold, some of the strategies can include litigation against landlords and property owners. They could be tenant lawsuits, and they could also be class action lawsuits. You could also advocate for stricter building codes that require mold-resistant construction materials and better ventilation in high-risk areas. Then, of course, there's workmen's compensation claims. So construction workers and others working in mold-contaminated environments can file workmen's comp claims. I don't know to what extent. It's not a complete solution. It would help with maybe your current expenses, but of course, you have to look after your health and make sure that the problem is eliminated. And then, of course, pushing for national or regional legislation that includes mold in workplace safety regulations, so that what is commonly known as occupational health standards are met. Advocacy efforts with regards to mold, advocacy groups can raise awareness through campaigning, especially in areas like we talked about earlier that are prone to flooding or poor construction, or happen to be in rural areas, where we can highlight the health risks, including respiratory issues and allergies, and that can help motivate policy changes. We can also insist on building specific regulations and standards. And then, of course, there's housing reform movements, in particularly for low-income housing. We've got to advocate for policies with mold prevention and remediation measures. And I think we've got to also stand in solidarity with people living in low-income housing who may not know what they can actually do legally and in terms of advocacy. So next, moving on to fluoride. Of course, legal challenges can be filed locally or nationally with your local government or your national government that mandate fluoride in drinking water. And you can now prove, using scientific papers and the case precedents we talked about earlier around neurotoxicity, fluoride poisoning, and damage caused to your bones, etc. And it violates the right to clean and safe drinking water. What else can you do? You can file petitions with different agencies. Within your government, you should have different agencies that are looking after, or should be, water and the quality of water. You can advocate for legislation to ban or limit fluoridation. I would outright say it needs to be banned. And here's where public participation, again, is extremely important. If you have referendums that exist in your country, like in Switzerland, to find ways to actually make sure those work for you. And of course, you could claim in terms of consumer protection lawsuits, one of my favorite topics, where you can challenge the widespread use of fluoride and target the marketing even of fluoride in products like toothpaste or bottled water. Then there's constitutional challenges. So you could challenge the practice of water fluoridation using your rights under the Constitution, and then test if your Constitution actually really works. In terms of advocacy, of course, again, numerous campaigns helping people understand why we're saying fluoride is such a risk to your health, both mentally and physically. And of course, you can rely then on scientific research and expert testimony. Political lobbying campaigns can also be used to convince state legislatures and municipalities to end this harmful practice. Mobilizing local communities, that is a crucial tactic. And if you're mobilizing a local community with pickets at your community hall or where your local government is actually based, that can be quite effective. It brings attention to an issue in a very powerful way. Finally, with regard to parasites, legal strategies, governments can implement public health laws aimed at reducing parasitic diseases. Sometimes they don't have access to the information that we have. Like in ivermectin, we faced a very big issue here in our country, as we did around the world, with accepting that ivermectin was not only for parasitic diseases, but could be used to treat coronavirus. And as we know, also for various forms of cancers. So they may have gone so far on this no to ivermectin that they don't realize it could actually assist with the spread of parasitic diseases. So more education needs to be done with them, inviting them to meetings or going to meet them and sharing the information that we have, much of which can be found on our website, worldcouncilforhealth.org. Then, of course, litigation against agricultural and industrial polluters. These are the ones that contaminate public land or water with parasites, because the meat or the produce that they are producing is actually contaminated. And we can actually force these companies to address their practices and compensate affected communities. Then, of course, there's international legal action. There's various international treaties. But again, that can become quite tricky because we want to decentralize health. We don't want to rely on international treaties that could become quite a threat to health freedom and sovereignty. And again, workman's comp, people can apply if they've been affected by toxoplasmosis or malaria while on the job. Advocacy efforts, Various campaigns can be launched to highlight parasitic diseases such as malaria and intestinal worms, highlighting the effect of preventative treatments, especially and including the natural ones. And of course, environmental advocacy for sanitation and clean water. It always comes back to this. These are fundamental rights: water, sanitation, electricity, communications, and proper housing. These are how we can create healthier societies. So, of course, is the use of bed nets and hygiene practices, etc., that is highly recommended. So, in conclusion, addressing these issues of mold, fluoride, parasites, but also plastics and heavy metals requires a multi-pronged approach of education, advocacy, and legal initiatives at the local, the national, and perhaps even the international levels. I would certainly recommend collaboration between activists, legal experts, doctors, public health organizations, etc., for effecting meaningful change in co-creating healthier communities. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Shabnam, for this very powerful update on the legal status of all the topics that we talked about here tonight. And thank you for also pushing decentralized approach that involves common sense and science of our times. And well, we often talk about what a centralized medicine actually leads to. If you look at, I'll just throw in some numbers here, yeah? So if you were talking about parasites, salt-transmitted helminths are affecting almost 24% of the global population, yeah? Schistosomiasis, over 250 million, malaria, over 240 million, elephantiasis, over 120 million, etc., etc. If you look at the who is who of parasites, we're talking about numbers, not only a few 100,000 million, 100 million, we're talking about 1/4 of the human population. And let's look for a short moment at a centralized approach to this. I just went on the WHO website to see what their program involves against these parasitic crises worldwide. And the number one, it is, would you have guessed, it's not a better sanitation, better water, and better hygiene and everything. It's preventative chemotherapy. So large-scale distribution of anti-parasitic medication at risk populations, regardless of individual infectious status. Can you imagine? Yeah. So chemotherapy preventative approach. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
I just want to mention, forgive me, you know, in order for that to fit completely with the World Health Organization model, those chemotherapeutic agents would need to be new. They would need a patent with a good lifespan, and preferably those patents should be partially owned by Bill Gates, so this program can be moved forward. Although I think there's a better way, and I'm being silly.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a few more numbers there. The number two is that is an integrated control program, yeah, which means co-administration of drugs. It's always about drugs. And as you mentioned, Mark, it won't be the repurposed ones. It will be new ones that will come out. Then it's vector control. That's the number three. And it's use of insecticides treated bed nets. It's not just using bed nets. No, they have to be treated with an insecticide, and then of course you have the genetically modified mosquitoes in itself. So number four is improved water sanitation and hygiene. It just shows you the priorities.
Number four.
And just highlighting how important it is to listen to tonight's panel, in which just common sense, natural approaches, and etiology of all of this is number one. And I think we should certainly develop some recommendations together with a legal status for all of this to counteract a centralized approach that is promoting a preventative chemotherapy for the entire humanity, it seems.
That's a really good idea, Christof. In the comments, Snoozle says, our pediatric dentist in California prescribed fluoride tablets, 40 milligrams for my daughter. Fire your pediatric dentist, is what I would say. Any response?
Well, I mean, I'm assuming by tablets he means swallow it. And we just pointed out earlier that fluoride may have some benefits topically, but unfortunately it's in your mouth, which it's easy to swallow stuff. So I certainly will not be accepting any fluoride pills for my grandchildren. That's clearly somebody who's not kept up with the science. And it's hard to keep up with the science when you have, you know, people like lawyers, political operatives pretending they're professors of pediatric medicine promoting fluoride and assaulting doctors who recommend otherwise. But yeah, no fluoride pills, folks. I think that's a bad idea.
I mean, when I dug into the topic, that was many years ago, and I came across an excellent website, 50 Reasons Against Fluoridization, that just opened my mind at that time because I was quite innocent with the knowledge. Yeah, there was an excellent website. I don't know if it still exists. I do remember there was not a single study proving that oral intake of fluoride has anything to do with hardening of teeth. It's just basically applying it to the surface and let it sink, yeah, which creates the hardening on the outside. And what Mark says, well, that might make the teeth more brittle and cause other problems, but never mind the systemic effect. So I'm not aware, and whoever recommends it can send us a study in which shows that oral intake of fluoride has anything to do with better teeth.
Yeah, and you know, folks, just keep an eye when you're watching people smile and children smile. Hopefully some children are still smiling out there. Have a look at their teeth, and you're going to see the white blotches of fluorosis. That's not a good thing. That's a condition of the teeth, and it makes the teeth more fragile. And it's also a sign that that kid has a lot of fluoride, and you can guarantee that shifted their IQ down. And the shift in IQs from fluoride water, like especially babies, if babies are drinking, you know, formula mixed up with fluoride, I mean, you can shift their IQ down 9 to 15 points. That's I mean, that's the difference between, you know, genius and kind of smart. And the other thing is even just a small shift in IQ points in the population, you can eliminate half your geniuses and double your people that are considered mentally handicapped based on function. So I think there really needs to be a caution about fluoride. And again, you want to harden up your teeth with something you can rub on them? No problem. Get one of the new hydroxyapatite containing toothpaste. Hydroxyapatite is the main matrix element of your teeth that makes them hard. So you can use the thing that belongs there instead of something that has no place in any chemical reaction in natural human biology.
The more I listened, the more we discussed it, the more it sounds to me like this is deliberate biowarfare. And of course, it brings the subject up of informed consent because people don't know. And you're forced to drink the water. And you think you have to use the toothpaste. And when you watch the toothpaste adverts, they're like filling that whole brush with a long tube of toothpaste that big, right? But they do say if you swallow more than a pea-sized amount, you should contact emergency services. Who knows that? Who's reading the fine print? So,
folks, have a look on the toothpaste container that you're probably going to throw out later that you bought for your children, your fluoride toothpaste. And, you know, you'll see ads like because it tastes good, kids may be brushing longer. Well, because it tastes good, kids are going to swallow it. The other thing, what about the dose? What's the dose of fluoride? Some people drink 10 glasses of town water a day, and some people drink 2. Even if you were going to take this teeth hardening, IQ lowering drug, maybe you'd want to pick the dose as opposed to random. I mean, it's complete randomness. It's as random and reckless as the COVID operation, where you just see people completely negating natural, common sense ways to be healthy and promoting things that harm the public, things that maximize profits. And in the case of fluoride, turned an expensive toxic waste product that was expensive to get rid of it into a profitable thing. You could get your friends in the government to give you some money and dump it in the people's drinking water. And the guys who are dumping it in, they have to wear a hazmat suit. The stuff peels the glass off the walls. Go and look in the room where they store the vats of this hydroxylic acid, and you'll see plastic and glass that is literally eroding. But no problem. Pour it in the water, feed it to your kids. Don't ask any questions.
Since when did we ever trust government? I mean, when you say it like that, it's so graphic to just picture all of this bio warfare going on, essentially. I'm so glad that the communities we're building around the world that we're co-creating with are awake to fluoride and all of these other toxins. Welcome back, Francesca. We've got about 10 minutes to go. We're going to move on next to some very exciting announcements, and then we're going to close with that beautiful song that we promised you. Mark, you have some announcements to share.
Yes, I do. And I would be very grateful if Mark Lawrie could bring up on the screen the first one, which is an event happening today. And this is an injection of truth. You may recall, folks, we had an injection of truth 1.0 last summer. I was one of the speakers. And this is a part of a big beachhead in Canada, because you could see United Conservatives. That's the United Conservatives Party of Alberta, which is promising to be, hopefully, our one and only legitimate political group that is in power anywhere in Canada and is doing something good. And this injection of truth has a phenomenal lineup of speakers. I had them before. Let's see if I can just bring them up to tell you about it. So Dr. Gary Davidson, who is an emergency doctor like myself, who stood up against the COVID agenda and is the lead author of the Alberta report that WCH Canada will be reporting on in this week ahead. Professor Dennis G. Rancourt, the scientist and mathematician who's analyzed the excess mortality data and said, oh, guess what? The virus didn't really keep people, but boy, the shot did. Dr. David Speaker, the virologist and geneticist who has been testing samples of the jabs from around the world and demonstrating the SV40 DNA adulteration, fraudulent gene hacking of humanity going on everywhere. Of course, one of my favorite people, Dr. Byron Bridle, needs no introduction. He's one of the speakers, along with Dr. Joni Liu, who's a newcomer to the forum, and Dr. David E. Martin, the intellectual property guru who has exposed the patents on the COVID agenda going back decades. And of course, my very good friend, Mr. Sean Buckley, who is the lead counsel and one of the founders of the National Citizens Inquiry. So that's going on today, and injectionoftruth.ca is the website. It is sold out in person as it was last time. But you know, last time, many thousands of people watch this around the world, and we're live streaming it. We're having live streaming parties. I guarantee you, folks, you will not be disappointed if you find time. That's at 6 p.m. Mountain Time in Canada, which is 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Toronto. And I guess for folks in the UK, that's going to be about 1 in the morning, but well worth staying up for. So that's one of the events I wanted to announce. Hard to believe there could be something bigger than that going on in Canada, but I think there's even one bigger event. And I wonder, Mark, if you could please bring up the other link for the National Citizens Inquiry hearings. So this is the National Citizens Inquiry, folks. This is we're several years now in the process. The largest testimonies under oath in the world about government response to COVID. And the hearings that are happening this weekend will address the question, are children safe in Canada? And let me tell you who some of the speakers are. Del Bigtree will actually be flying in from the United States to attend on Saturday. Dr. Jessica Rose, Dr. Chris Shoemaker, Dr. William Mackus, Dr. David Speaker, John Carpe, one of the real leads of the legal struggle in Canada for human rights. I will be speaking on Saturday as well, and various other great speakers. And that can be tapped into by going to National Citizens, with an S, National Citizens Inquiry.ca. Have a look at the Edmonton hearings. You can live stream it for free, and you won't be disappointed. Thank you very much for letting me share that, folks.
It's so exciting. So much happening in Canada. Well done. And thank you for also live streaming it. So, you know, our allies around the world can actually tune in and see what's going on, how much we have in common with each other, and how much we can show solidarity with each other, learn strategies, etc. That's amazing. We also have something very exciting happening in Malaysia. There's a press conference, and we're going to look at the poster shortly. Thank you, Mark. Coming up on the 13th of March, that is next week, Thursday. It's a press conference around a class action on COVID-19 and the experimental vaccines. 10 a.m. Malaysia time, Thursday the 13th. We are working on live streaming it, so watch the space, watch our various social media platforms. And this initiative is being driven by Haji Mohamed Zainuddin, who's a lawyer in Malaysia. Also invited is Dr. Richard Fleming, scientist, doctor, and attorney. And you might recognize the person on the right bottom there. Also participate. I've been asked to moderate or facilitate, which I'm very happy to do because this is a class action, which means there's a group of litigants that have approached a lawyer to say we have a common cause. Please, can you represent us? I'm a great fan of class actions because we are stronger together, not in the creepy WHO World Economic Forum way, but in the Ubuntu way. We are because of each other. So please look out for more details on that press conference and support this case in Malaysia if you can, wherever you might be at the world, because a success in one part of the world can become a success in another. Do we have any other announcements to share? No? All right. Well, we're close. Go ahead.
Not today.
Not today. Well, we're closing in on the last 5 minutes of today's brilliant episode. I have to say it's been really eye-opening and empowering. So thank you very much to my stellar colleagues, allies, and friends at World Council for Health. We're going to play out with a very special song, and it's a classic by Marvin Gaye called What's Going On. And the song is so relevant to the troubles that our world is seeing right now, including but not limited to all forms of conflicts and wars. And it's asking the question, what's going on? And it also has a very powerful, inspiring message. So do enjoy the song. It is set to an animation which is brilliantly created. Whoever the creator might be, full credit to you. Thank you for joining us today. Any closing words from anyone? Going once?
Well, I wake up every day with the lyrics of that song, What's Going On? So, yeah.
So as I suspected, all of us are going to thoroughly enjoy this song. Take care, everyone, and remember, there's a better way. Bye.
Thank you for watching this episode of Better Way today. If you found value in it, please consider making a value exchange with us. The World Council for Health is a grassroots people's organization, and we rely on funding from people just like you. Your contributions from as little as $5 or £5 or 100 Rand help to power our work. The World Council for Health team is on a mission to serve you. Please make it your mission to support us. Thank you.